At 83, the tragedy of Harrison Ford is beyond heartbreaking. Harrison Ford. The name alone conjures images burned into the collective memory of the world. The rogue smuggler with a crooked smile who made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. The archaeologist in a leather jacket, whip in hand, racing through ancient temples. The Blade Runner hunting replicants in neon-soaked rain. He didn't just play heroes. He became them. Icons that will outlive us all. But behind that weathered face, those knowing eyes that have seen galaxies far, far away, lies a story the cameras never captured. A story of survival bought with blood and broken bones, of love lost to ambition and time, of death that came too close, too often, of a man who flew too high and fell from the sky, literally, again and again, yet somehow always dragged himself from the wreckage to fly once more. At 83, Harrison Ford stands as Hollywood's last great lone wolf, a carpenter who became a king, a father who missed too many moments, a pilot who cheated death so many times that fate itself must wonder when to stop offering second chances. And now, as the years press heavy against bones that have been broken and mended more times than he can count, the quiet storm of his life reveals itself not in explosions or adventures, but in the silent weight of everything he has survived and everything he has lost. If Harrison Ford has ever made you believe in heroes, made you dream of adventure, or simply reminded you that even broken men can still stand tall, honor him now, not with applause, but with understanding. Because this is not the story of Han Solo or Indiana Jones. This is the story of a man who learned too late that the real treasure was never in the temple, and the real journey was never to the stars, but home to the people waiting for him in the dark. The Invisible Boy. How does a hero begin? Not with a sword or a spaceship, but with silence, with the kind of invisibility that makes you wonder if you even exist at all. Harrison Ford was born on July 13, 1942, in the working-class heart of Chicago, Illinois. His father, Christopher, was an advertising executive and former actor who never quite made it. His mother, Dorothy, a former radio actress whose dreams had faded into the hum of ordinary life. They were Irish Catholic and Russian Jewish, a household where identity was complicated, where belonging was something you built, not inherited. Harrison was painfully shy, the kind of boy who disappeared into corners, who watched life rather than lived it. He stuttered when nervous, fumbled with words, and found refuge in silence. School was a prison of expectations he couldn't meet. He wasn't the athlete. He wasn't the scholar. He was the invisible kid who felt like he was always standing outside looking in through glass he couldn't break. Then came Ripon College in Wisconsin, where he studied philosophy, still searching for something he couldn't name. Almost by accident, he wandered into a drama class. Not because he loved theater, but because he needed the credit. And when he stood on that small stage, reading lines that belonged to someone else, something shifted. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. It was there he met Mary Marquardt. She was radiant, kind, with soft eyes and a belief in him that he didn't yet have in himself. In 1964, they married. He was 22, she was 21, and they had nothing but love and a reckless faith that somehow it would be enough. After graduation, he packed everything into a battered car and drove to Los Angeles, the city of broken dreams. Mary came with him, working as a chef while he chased auditions that led nowhere. He signed with studios, but casting directors called him a face without character. One executive told him he'd never make it, that he lacked star quality. The rejections piled up like unpaid bills. By the late 1960s, he had two sons, Benjamin, born in 1966, and Willard, born in 1969. Two beautiful boys who needed food, clothes, shelter, and their father couldn't provide it from acting alone. The weight of that failure pressed against his chest every morning. So Harrison Ford became a carpenter. He bought books from the library, taught himself to build. His hands, which had once only held scripts, now gripped hammers and saws. The work was hard, honest, and paid, but every nail he drove felt like one more step away from the dream. His first big carpentry job was building a recording studio for Brazilian jazz musician Sergio Mendes. Ford had never built a recording studio before. He didn't tell Mendes that. He just figured it out. Soon he was building for the stars he once hoped to work beside. He was in their homes, breathing the same air as success, but always through the back door, always with sawdust in his hair. Then came 1973. He was hired to install a door at Francis Ford Coppola's offices. While he worked, George Lucas was casting for a small space movie nobody believed in. Lucas needed someone to read lines with actresses auditioning for Princess Leia. He saw the carpenter in the hallway. "Can you help us out?" Ford shrugged, put down his tools, and walked into the room. He read opposite dozens of hopefuls, his delivery sharp, effortless, real. Lucas kept watching him, not the actresses, him. Days later, Lucas called, "I want you to play Han Solo." The carpenter who had given up became the smuggler who never would. When Star Wars exploded in 1977, Harrison Ford went from invisible to immortal. The man who couldn't get a callback was now the face on every magazine, every poster, every child's bedroom wall. But the galaxy had already begun to cost him something precious. The betrayal. Fame arrived like a flood, and it drowned everything he'd built. By 1979, Harrison Ford wasn't just an actor. He was an icon. The Empire Strikes Back was filming, and he was no longer the unknown carpenter. He was Han Solo, the man every woman wanted and every man wanted to be. The world demanded him. And somewhere in that chaos, he forgot the woman who had believed in him when no one else did was still at home, waiting. Her name was Carrie Fisher. She was 19, brilliant, wounded, electric. He was 33, married, the father of 2 boys. On the frozen sets of Hoth, in the dim corners of sound stages, something caught fire between them. It lasted 3 months. A secret affair that felt like rebellion, like freedom. Carrie would later write about it in her memoir, how she loved him desperately, how he was kind but distant, how the affair was doomed from the start. For Harrison, it was something else. A betrayal not of vows, but of the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. Mary found out. The details don't matter. Betrayal doesn't need details. It just needs truth. And truth is always enough to shatter everything. In 1979, after 15 years of marriage, they divorced. She kept the boys. He kept his career. The settlement was quiet, private, the kind of ending that doesn't make headlines but leaves scars no camera will ever capture. Years later, when asked about his greatest regret, Ford's voice would crack just slightly. "Sometimes I think I have been a better actor than husband or father." That sentence is the saddest kind of truth, the kind that can't be fixed. Mary moved on as best she could. She raised Benjamin and Willard alone, being both mother and father while their real father saved the world on screens across the globe. She never remarried, never spoke publicly about the marriage. She simply lived quietly, with a grace that Harrison Ford himself has admitted he never deserved. But life wasn't done breaking her. In the late 1980s, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a brutal, incurable disease that slowly robs the body of its ability to move. Despite the divorce, despite everything, Ford stepped in. He bought her a house. He paid for treatments. He made sure she would never be abandoned twice. Today, Mary Marquardt lives in a wheelchair, cared for by the sons she raised alone. She never gave interviews, never wrote a memoir. She simply existed, with a quiet dignity that speaks louder than any words could. She was the one who believed first, Ford once said, staring out a window. Before the world, before I did. The second loss. In 1983, Harrison Ford married again. Her name was Melissa Matheson, a brilliant screenwriter whose words had made the world weep in E.T. the Extraterrestrial. They met in 1976 during the filming of Apocalypse Now in the Philippines. In the chaos of the jungle, they found each other. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was something slower, deeper. They shared a love of nature, of privacy, of building a life away from the cameras. When they married, it felt like a second chance. They had 2 children, Malcolm, born in 1987, and Georgia, born in 1990. For a while, the ranch they bought in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, felt like salvation-wide skies, endless land, no paparazzi. Ford would chop wood, ride horses, play with his kids in the snow. It looked like peace. But peace is fragile when you're one of the most famous men on Earth. By the late 1990s, the cracks began to show. Ford was always working, always on location. Indiana Jones, The Fugitive, Air Force One. He was at the peak of his powers, earning $20 million per film, but the cost was measured in missed birthdays, empty chairs at dinner tables, and a wife who began to feel like a widow. In 2000, they separated. In 2001, Melissa filed for divorce. What followed was brutal. There was no prenuptial agreement. The lawyers circled like vultures. For 3 years, they fought over money, assets, custody. By the time it was finalized in 2004, Melissa walked away with $85 million, one of the most expensive divorces in Hollywood history. But money was never the point. The point was that they had loved each other once, and fame had slowly, methodically killed it. Ford moved on. He dated Callista Flockhart and eventually married her in 2010. He adopted her son, Liam. He tried again. Melissa retreated into her work. She wrote scripts, lived quietly, and never spoke publicly about the marriage that had ended in courtrooms. Then, on November 4th, 2015, the call came. Melissa Matheson had died, neuroendocrine cancer. She was 65 years old. The disease had moved quietly, quickly. By the time anyone knew, it was too late. Steven Spielberg released a statement. Melissa had a heart that shined with generosity and love. Ford didn't release a statement. What could he possibly say? At her memorial, he sat in the back, sunglasses hiding eyes that had seen too much. Malcolm and Georgia sat nearby, carved from the same grief. They had lost their mother. He had lost the woman who had given him a second chance and watched him waste it. The sky that tried to kill him. If you ask Harrison Ford what saved his life, he won't say acting. He'll say flying. Flying absolutely reinvented my life, he said countless times. It gave me a sense of freedom I'd never had before. But freedom, for Harrison Ford, has always come with a price written in blood and broken bones. He started flying in the 1960s. By the time he became famous, he owned multiple aircraft, helicopters, vintage World War II planes. He would fly alone over the California desert, the world falling away beneath him. But the sky doesn't care who you are, and it has tried, again and again, to kill him. In 1999, his helicopter crashed during a practice emergency landing, crashing into a riverbed. The aircraft was destroyed. Ford and his instructor walked away bruised but alive. Then came March 5th, 2015, the day he should have died. Ford was piloting his vintage 1942 Ryan aeronautical plane, a World War II-era single-engine aircraft. He took off from Santa Monica Airport. Then the engine died. In the terrible silence that followed, Harrison Ford, 72 years old, had seconds to decide how he would die. Below him was Penmar Golf Course, open, empty. The only choice. He turned the plane toward it and brought it down hard. The impact shattered metal and bone. The plane tore into the earth, crumpling like paper. When first responders arrived, they found him trapped in the wreckage, covered in blood. Broken pelvis, broken arm, broken ankle, severe head injuries. His face was unrecognizable, swollen and bleeding. "I thought he was dead," one paramedic later said. They cut him from the wreckage and rushed him to UCLA Medical Center. For hours, doctors worked, piecing him back together. Callista waited in the hallway, praying. He survived. Somehow. The investigation later revealed that a tiny piece of metal in the carburetor had come loose. It hadn't been properly maintained in 17 years. A piece barely larger than a pill had nearly killed one of the most famous men in the world. But he didn't stop flying. In 2017, he mistakenly landed on a taxiway at John Wayne Airport, nearly hitting an American Airlines 737 carrying over 100 passengers. His voice crackled over the radio. "I'm the schmuck who landed on the taxiway." In 2020, he crossed an active runway while another plane was landing. Critics demanded he stop flying, that at 78, he was too old, too dangerous. He refused. "Flying is part of who I am," he said. "I won't give up the sky." Because for Harrison Ford, flying was never about the destination. It was about control. About being alone in a space where fame didn't matter, where the only thing that mattered was skill and the thin line between life and death. At 83, still standing. Today, Harrison Ford is 83 years old. His hair is white, his face a roadmap of every choice he's ever made. His body carries the weight of decades lived too hard. The broken bones from the plane crash still ache. His hands tremble slightly when he's tired, but he's still working. He just appeared in Captain America, Brave New World, playing Thaddeus Ross. He stars in the Apple TV Plus series Shrinking. Earning his first Emmy nomination, he's still married to Callista Flockhart. Still flies, though less frequently now. He has 5 children total. Benjamin and Willard from Mary, Malcolm and Georgia from Melissa, and Liam, Callista's adopted son. Georgia has struggled with epilepsy since childhood. Malcolm became a musician. Benjamin and Willard have lived private lives, choosing normalcy over the spotlight. "I don't want to be young again," Ford said recently. "You are certainly physically diminished by age, but there are wonderful things about age. Richness of experience, perspective. But perspective doesn't erase regret, and experience doesn't heal the wounds of time." Mary Marquardt still lives in her wheelchair, her body betrayed by disease. Melissa Matheson is buried somewhere, her words still alive in scripts, but her voice forever silent. The plane crash left scars that throb when it rains. The divorces left scars that throb when he's alone. At 83, Harrison Ford stands as Hollywood's last great lone wolf. A man who traded everything for glory and spent decades trying to figure out if it was worth it. A carpenter who became a king but never quite learned how to be a husband, a father, a man who stayed instead of always leaving. The world still sees Han Solo, still sees Indiana Jones, but the man beneath the legend is just a man. Tired, scarred, still fighting, still flying, still searching for something he lost so long ago he can barely remember what it looked like. Maybe it was a small house in Chicago. Maybe it was Mary's smile before he broke her heart. Maybe it was Melissa's hand in his on a Wyoming ranch. Maybe it was the moment before the plane's engine died and the world went silent. Harrison Ford flew to the stars and found them cold. He flew planes until they tried to kill him. He loved women until love wasn't enough. He built an empire and watched it crumble in family courts and hospital rooms and wheelchairs and graves. At 83, he's still here, still standing, still refusing to quit. And maybe that's the only victory that matters. Not the films or the money or the fame, just the stubborn, beautiful, heartbreaking refusal to stay down. If this story has touched your heart, if Harrison Ford's journey has reminded you that even heroes bleed, that even legends carry scars, then honor him not with applause, but with understanding. Because the truest measure of a man is not what he achieves, but what he survives. And Harrison Ford has survived everything the world could throw at him. Everything except time itself. And that clock, like the engine of a vintage plane over the Pacific, is running out. But until it stops, he'll keep flying.